Welcome to the Conflict Stories podcast with Sam and Scott, where real people share their professional and personal stories of conflict.
Whether you're looking for advice or the comfort of knowing you're not alone, Conflict Stories brings the human and positive side of conflict to the forefront.
Tune in, connect, learn, and transform. Welcome to our next episode of Conflict Stories with me, Sam Hardy, and Scott Dutton. Before we start, I'd like to pay my respects to the Indigenous owners of the lands from which I'm joining you today, which is the Kaurna and the Peramunk people up in the Adelaide Hills.
And I'm in Byron on Bundjalung country, and Ian, you're up in the lovely Sunshine Coast, aren't you? What lands are you on today?
The Gubbi Gubbi land near Buderim on the Sunshine Coast.
Very nice. And I get the privilege of doing your intro today, Ian. So Ian says he was born cold, wet, bald, and hungry. And then things apparently got worse.
They did.
By age 9, he was confused by life. By age 18, he was talking example of his father's frequent claim that fair income, son, you're starting to be an idiot. A bit rough. By 28, he was leading a 200 million revenue sales team. Well done. And by 29, he was dead broke. That's unfortunate. And by 30, thankfully, he had found his groove and was finally living his purpose. So today, Ian Stevett has been invited to speak around the world, 29 countries so far. That's a lot, Ian. He has a passion for equipping people with practical skills that they can use immediately and ensure revenue targets happen, and also to manage their state of mind. That will be interesting. He is the author of 6 books, including the 7 Universal Laws of Sales Success, Shift, get that right, Culture, and Shift Mindset. And he's won many awards with the PSA, and only this year he won Keynote Speaker of the Year. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Great to be here. And I tell people I'm writing my 7th book as we speak. I think I've landed on the title. I'm going to go with How to Be Happy Without Money.
Ooh.
Yeah, and that's going to retail for $26,942. So I think I'm on a winner there.
We always start, and given the quote from your father, it's probably going to be a juicy question. We always start by asking, what was conflict like in your family when you were growing up?
Yeah, it's interesting. That little quote in the intro, Dad used to look at you a certain way when you did things that didn't please him, and he'd say, yeah, fair dinkum, son, you're studying to be a bloody idiot. So, I grew up with a father who was very direct. He was a bit old school. He'd call a spade a spade. And I didn't really realise the impact that had on my self-esteem until I was well into adulthood. And what I learned, though, was he meant the best. He did the best job he knew how to do. He just didn't realise how his personality came across sometimes, and he'd cause your knees to shake. I think I was scared of him most of my life. So I grew up in this environment that was probably like a lot of other Australian children, that try and please your parents and avoiding conflict. And I was that middle child who's always the problem child, aren't they? So, my older brother, Mark, and my younger brother, Todd, were more like Dad, if that makes sense. Whereas Dad and I were like ships passing in the night. But it was often, instead of the fists passing in the night, for those who are watching the video of the show, we were kind of locking horns on a regular basis. So Mum was the peacemaker, and I think I followed in my grandmother's steps of trying to avoid conflict wherever possible. So that was kind of my upbringing. Yeah.
Ian, I reckon your dad and mine would have got on really well, because my dad didn't call a spade a spade. He called a spade a bloody shovel. And the other thing that he said that I think you'd relate to is he used to say, God only made a few perfect heads and on the rest he put hair.
I do love that one. Yeah, yeah. I think it's taken me about 40 grand in therapy so far to get over my father, but it's still a work in progress. And I love him dearly. He's been gone about 9 years ago, so I'm on safe territory talking about him.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I think as you get older, you start to reflect, and obviously it has an impact. And still, it's realizing that they were doing their best. And I think that
Yes.
helps with that sort of letting go, forgiveness, all that sort of thing as well.
Yeah. I reckon it was when I did my NLP studies, neuro linguistic programming. I went through the practitioner and then the master prac course. The master prac, well, the one I did anyway, made you really reflect on yourself, use yourself as the case study to understand your values. And I kind of had an awakening. So, we're talking in my early 30s. I had a bit of an awakening to the fact that I actually don't have to have the same values my parents had, which was what was causing a lot of conflict, particularly between me and Dad. He valued different things to what I valued. And you two would understand this better than me, but any conflict that has played out on this planet, that is playing out right now or will in the future, is a values conflict. It's people valuing things differently. And I was able to kind of just get a little more assertive with Dad and go, well, that's your opinion, Dad, and that's based on what you value, but that's not what I value. So, that led to some fairly, I won't say heated conversations, but some assertive conversations over time.
You shared with me prior, Ian, that you've been through 3 marriages as well. And I
Yes.
wonder if you reflected on yourself on that. No.
Yeah, just a little correction there. I've been through 2 and I'm currently in my last
On your
one.
third.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spoiler
Yeah.
alert, the third one is still
Spoiler.
going.
Yeah,
Going
that's
strong.
yeah, as long as
Yeah.
she continues to behave herself. No, let's not go there. It was interesting. A guy I reported to in the West Farmers group before I broke out and chased my dream to be a speaker and an educator, David Smith. He was also a distant relation. He was married to my father's cousin, but he was my boss there for a while. And I remember going to see him after my second very quick marriage fell apart. Second one was only 9 months, didn't even make the 12-month mark. So I don't know that it actually qualifies as the second marriage. But he said to me after that one, he said, you do realise you're the common denominator in these relationships not working out. Are you going to reflect on that? And I did. I went into a cave and I did that typical male thing of licking my wounds and reflecting on why this was all playing out on my life. I learnt a few lessons and got clarity on what I did want. And that was very much about, okay, I'm ready for a person to show up now that has a very similar value set to me. So we keep coming back to these values, don't we? And that was a driver for Karina turned up in my life. And we've got a lot in common at a values level. So when there is the occasional conflict or differing of opinions, you can quickly drop beneath whatever values are going on and realize we've actually got something in common when you do, in NLP terms, what we call a drop through and look at what's going on beneath that value. And you're both trying to get the same values met just through different behaviors, perhaps.
Ian, what did you learn from those marriages that didn't work out about how conflict tends to play out in relationships and what works and what doesn't?
I think the biggest thing I learned was, I call it, everyone's got their own pain body. So it's like an emotional body that's inside our own body that gets triggered from time to time. Like in that second marriage, I remember laying there on a Sunday morning reading the paper on the lounge room floor. Strange, but that's how I used to like to read the paper. And Donna, my ex, was like, I don't know, just getting a little bit antsy and dropping a few comments and then getting a bit, I'll clean it up, annoyed with me. And it was kind of like, hang on, what's going on here? I know the housework's got to be done and I'll get into that. Just give me another 15 minutes, and I'll be done with the paper. But what it turned out was she'd come out of a past relationship where this guy she was with used to expect her to do all the housework while he'd sit around just gaming all weekend. And so me laying around for a little while when there was some housework to be done in her mind, that triggered her pain body. And she's representing what's going on now according to an old emotional wound and behaving accordingly. And so that was interesting. I guess my past marriages have helped me realize that you just got to make allowances for people's individuality, both in their values, and acknowledge the fact that there's past wounds that sometimes get triggered and you've got nothing to do with it. You just happen to be the one that triggered it. They're kind of annoyed at the universe and you're now in the way.
We talk about conflict stories. People bring their past conflict stories into the present relationship, don't they? And then they cast you in the role of a past story, and it's not what's happening now, but that takes over.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body too, doesn't he, Ian? And I think it's really tricky when, say, your partner's pain body's triggered and then that triggers your pain body. And then you're
Yes.
both,
Yep.
that's when it gets
Yep.
really challenging because you're both caught up in that emotion or that reactivity or I like the word you used was wound, they're caught up in that wound. And then how do you sort through conflict and that sort of situation where you're both triggered?
Yes.
And
And I find with me, if I'm completely honest, and it's still a journey to master this, my tone of voice just goes when my pain body's triggered, and then there's this reaction happening between you and another party, and then they respond to your tone of voice, and it just spirals quickly out of control.
Yeah. And the word you used, reactive, we become reactive rather than making a considered response.
Yep.
And the tone of voice can be more important than the words you were saying.
Yeah, so I think in my personal relationships, but it definitely flows over into professional as well. I'm not by any means a master at this yet, and it's an ongoing journey, but I try to be the one that stops and, okay, Ian, there's different opinions and values going on here. You have to demonstrate you understand more about the other party's model of the world. So stop arguing your point of view, stop trying to have them come around to your position, and just go into inquiry mode and curiosity as to why they're thinking that way. So Stephen Covey's old habit of seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I find so many people are just defensive of their position rather than stepping into curiosity mode and trying to understand the other party's model of the world. The more you do that, the more they're prepared to understand your model of the world. But someone's got to go first. And so when we're defending our position, that's always just in the back of my mind. Okay, there's a little bit of conflict going on here. Stop, go into empathy mode. Let's understand more about their model of the world. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but let's step into their shoes and try and understand where they're coming from more.
Yeah, it has so much power that ensuring the other person feels heard and understood. And as you say, Ian, you don't have to agree with their perspective because if that doesn't happen, it's just hard to move on.
Absolutely.
It's hard to let go. It's hard to listen to the other person's perspective. So it takes a fair effort and some wisdom, I think, to be able to do that. Because a lot of people struggle to be able to almost put their perspective to the side for a moment and actually try to hear and understand the other. It's really tricky.
And one of the tools I was taught in my NLP studies was position shifting. So, you're in first position where you are you arguing things from your point of view. And then the second position is the other party and their model of the world and their views. But you can also move into third position, which you two would probably understand. But I found it a brilliant technique and tool just to remember in that moment that there is some conflict going on. Okay, Ian, move into third position, which is like you're going to float up out of yourself and look down on the interaction going on. Be the observer of both parties, including yourself, and look at it through the eye of a third party, third position. And, okay, I can see where she or he's coming from. I also still feel this, but I can now, you just have this slightly emotionally removed position that you adopt because you're not in your own body anymore and so associated with your own feelings. You've actually shifted into a third position as the observer. And I find that a really useful tool that I've been able to apply.
Do you come to Byron a bit? Because we step out of our bodies too sometimes. So
Well, as you know, I used to live about 38 minutes inland from Byron, a little place called Federal. And whenever I would mention I did spend 5 years in the Byron Shire, people would automatically go, "Oh, Nimbin. Did you live in Nimbin?" Right? So for those listeners who don't know, it's Australia's like marijuana capital of the world. It was like about a 42-minute drive to Nimbin, and then it'd take me about 3 hours to get home, man, because I'd want to go via the local Macca's because I was really needing some food.
Right, let's bring this back down to earth a little bit. One of the things that I think is really interesting is, as a leader, you do have to make hard decisions, right? So yes, you have to listen and understand the people that you're leading, but sometimes you do have to take a stand and make a decision that might not be popular, that people might not agree with. And I know you led a huge team at Wesfarmers, $200 million revenue sales team. How did you manage the challenge of wanting to get along and be cooperative, but also having to lead and, be an example and make hard decisions?
Yeah, well, that David Smith that I reported to for a while, he didn't quite label it as I know it now, but the old autocratic democratic continuum. He was very much a fan of, Ian, go down and consult with the team, get their views, opinions. I mean, fundamental human needs. We just like to feel valued and consulted, don't we? So David taught me to go ask the team their views, but then in a leadership role, unless it's really obvious which way to go, someone's got to come back just the autocratic side of centre and make a decision. But as long as you've demonstrated, hey, I've consulted everyone and I've heard you and I understand where you're all coming from. Sometimes I had to paint the bigger picture of the why frame because I understood some things about where the business was going that they may not have been privy to. But just communicating and demonstrating a strong why frame for people. I'm astounded at the number of leaders, and of course it won't apply to any of your listeners, just everyone else in the world that I interact with, that, we're very quick to go into talking about the what and the how, and we don't spend enough time painting a really strong why frame for people, which is where you're stroking their values and setting the context. And if they've got a good why, they're more motivated to do the what. When they don't have a why, they'll dig in and be challenging why, and all of a sudden some values conflict starts to come out. So that was the biggest thing I learned leading large teams, was over communicate the why frame, the context, and then get into the what.
A lot of people do that consultation, but it's kind of lip service. They're not really using it. They've already made their decision. So they go through the motions of doing the consultation, but everybody knows it's not taken seriously. How do you differentiate an effective leader who does more than that, who makes people feel like they really are valued, even though the decision might not be the same as what they want? How do you avoid that lip service consultation?
I think it just comes back to being authentic and genuine in who you are as a leader is who you are as a person, and you're not playing lip service to it. People can see through that ungenuine approach. It's a technique. They can see through it so clearly. So it's really just genuinely wanting to consult to understand their model of the world. You might have preconceived ideas of which way we need to go because of other factors shaping the business or influencing the business, but genuinely go in with an open mind and a blank sheet of paper. And then when you do make a decision, demonstrate why. So we're back to that why framing again.
Yeah, nice, Ian. I like that. As a speaker, you've won almost every award you can win. You're a CSP, you're a Nevin Award winner, you're a Keynote Speaker of the Year, the Educator of the Year. Is there anything you haven't won, Ian?
They've had a very low bar. No.
The Nobel Peace Prize is next, right?
I wish.
So you've been in the speaking world for a long time, and I'm interested to know, because I've certainly had some conflicts in the speaking world and training world. I know you're a trainer as well. What's some of the things you've had to navigate in that world, and what's been challenging for you? Because there's a lot of strong personalities, shall we say? Big personalities.
Egos in the speaking world, never.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I've seen a few. Anyway.
Present company accepted, of course.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Sam.
I actually have never been the president of PSA, Professional Speakers Australia, but I've played lots of other roles around the edges. And one of the most recent ones I stepped into was being the convener of our national conference, our Cadence conference in 25. And that was really interesting. After like 27 years since I've leapt out of the corporate world and been doing what I do, integrating with teams and teaching leadership skills, but not actually being a leader. So it was interesting to have a team of about 7 people to bring that whole event together. And I think the critical things that helps you avoid conflict is a good leader, again, consults the team, but has a very, articulates a very clear, bold vision for the team. And I spent time on that the first time we pulled that committee together. It was right, what's our bold vision for this team? What are we going to achieve? And let's get on the same page with what we're trying to achieve here. And I won't go religious on you, but people buy into that. I think the Bible does somewhere quote about without a vision, people perish. And that very much applies in teams in the corporate world. Without a clear vision, people start going off in all directions. So get them on the same page and involved in creating that vision. You might have an idea of the first draft of it, but get them involved on what the second final draft looks like. And then you won't have as much conflict along the way. That was my experience. I think the second thing with any, not just in the speaking industry, but in any of the worlds of your listeners and viewers out there, is knowing the difference between being aggressive and being assertive. And that's been a real defining moment for me when someone said aggressive behavior is when you're violating someone else's rights because you're being aggressive towards them, whereas assertive is when you're standing up for your own rights without violating someone else's. Submissive, of course, is people are walking all over you, but assertiveness is doing that standing up for your own rights without violating anyone else's. I found the little assertiveness wheel that I was introduced to years ago has just been an outstanding tool when I stepped back into that leadership role. Just running around that wheel of I think, I feel, I would prefer. I think I get where you're coming from, and then acknowledge their model of the world and their views and opinions. I feel, now share your feelings, not pointing the finger and, casting blame, but owning how you're feeling at the moment, then directionalizing how you'd prefer things to go. Right? Yeah, no, look, I get it. I think I understand what you're saying, that I should just replace that last minute speaker who's pulled out with someone like Scott Dutton, who's brilliant. I could trust him and he could do it beautifully. But I feel I'm going to get the agenda out of balance because it's a female who's pulled out and it's a lead keynote speaking role. So I would prefer we find a female who can fit in. We're going to have to move fast. So I'm saying no to those options you put up, and we need to go back to the drawing board and have a female keynoter so there's gender balance. So see, I'm using that I think, I feel, I would prefer, and it's a beautiful way to elegantly say no. That's what I've found over the years. So I had to use that a lot in my recent leadership role.
The point the finger thing that you just did reminded me of something a Buddhist nun said to me once. When you point the finger of blame at somebody, remember there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. And she said, ask yourself, have I contributed to this problem? Am I contributing to it escalating and continuing? And what can I do to contribute to its resolution?
Yeah, I love that. And it's the reason why I never point. I'm always just doing this. So it's just like,
And maybe the thumb is the reminder to go to third position.
oh, that's nice.
There you
Yeah, I
go.
really like that. There's a reminder to go to third position. Go up, float up, have a look down on it as the observer. Nice, Sam. See, this is why you get paid the big bucks. Love it.
To come up with corny, I don't know what it is. It's not a mnemonic. Oh my God, we're going to go into Sam's pronunciation challenges in a minute. The last episode we recorded, I stumbled over this same word about 50 times. It was very embarrassing. This is why I'm not a keynote speaker.
We all do it. That's interesting. And what I was trying to do is find out names of who's been difficult, really. That was my question.
Scott is always on the gossip hunt. Like, give us some names. Tell us some people who've done really awful things.
Well, I mean, there's a point, isn't it? I find in the corporate world with the work I do with culture change. But have I mentioned that all my books are available in all good bookstores? But Shift Culture, and for those who are listening, not viewing, it's got a big F in the word shift, because what we don't want is an F-less shift. Well, we don't want a culture. We want to shift the culture sometimes. And the biggest thing that destroys a cohesive culture and creates conflict is gossip, in my opinion. You know, where people are talking about things they've heard from a third party. They don't even know if it's real, but they're prepared to share it. Right? So, you know, we want a conflict-free zone and no gossip. So, Scott, stop it.
Well, look, mate, I've got to make money. So anyway, no, I agree, because I do a little bit of team culture work as well. And I think, do you know what I reckon's lacking a lot is, because then I provide a difficult conversation model, because often people don't have the skills to be able to go and approach the other person. And sometimes it's the, being receptive to feedback, of course, and having that conversation two-way. Often I find that people feel reluctant to go and have that conversation. And as you say, then they talk to others and it gets very messy very quickly. So for me, creating a healthy team culture is working out what the issues are and how to resolve those, and having the skills and a model to have those conversations early on proactively, so it doesn't fester.
Yes, yeah. And, I had a little, let's just say, a little challenge and a differing opinion with my assistant, not Karina, my actual operations assistant, last week. And I could have let that fester, but it would have been all weekend until our Monday morning meeting that it would have been festering on my mind. So you've got to have the courage to pick up the phone and go, look, can I just share something with you so we clear the air on this fast, because I could be coming at it from the wrong angle. When you start with those sorts of words, you're sending a signal that I just don't want this to fester, and I'd rather get it out in the open and clear the air on it. And two minds are always better than one. When she'd shared her view on it, and it was like, oh, okay, now I see what you've done, what you did, right? And so that relaxes me a little more. I still would prefer her to do it a different way, and we went on and had that conversation, but I'm clearing the air fast. And I felt so good after that phone call, because it's like, now I can relax and it's not going to be taking up energy all weekend. Right?
You can lie on the ground and read your paper all weekend then, even.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, while Karina does the housework. No, I have learnt some lessons, Scott.
I think that's a really great point, that we tend to avoid conflict, and then not only does that let it fester and escalate, but we have to live with it bugging us until we have that difficult conversation. But I think there's also another layer, that we deny conflict exists. We don't recognize those little things that annoy us, and we sort of let them go past. So we don't even recognize that we need to have a little difficult conversation. And so I think it's not just about avoiding the conflict we notice, it's about recognizing that conflict happens in our lives all the time on a daily basis. And we have to recognize a little disagreement is a conflict, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a fact of life. And if we engage with it, if we recognize, oh, here's something that's bothering me, that I disagree about, or that I have a difference of opinion, I think I might raise it. it often then becomes a productive conflict that gets resolved really easily. But it's this
Yes.
denial, and then when we recognize it, avoiding it, and then it's so much harder, isn't it? I think conflict's got this reputation that we shouldn't have it, but actually conflict is normal and we should have it. We should just recognize it and deal with it early, do the difficult conversation before it's too hard, and then conflict becomes a positive part of life, not something that we all need to fear and avoid and have to appoint us to mediate. I mean, much as I don't
Yes.
want to lose my job, wouldn't it be great if we could work our way out of a job?
Without
Yeah.
mediating. I did like how you started that, Ian, because I think it's like, hey, look, I have a perspective. It's having a bit of an impact, or something I've reacted to, and you're more or less saying, hey, I may not have the full story,
Mm.
and I want to hear your perspective. So it's a really inviting. It's not saying, hey, you've done something wrong, and I'm cross about it. It's saying, hey, something, and I want to understand from your perspective or your worldview, your
Your model of the world.
model of the world. I like that.
Yeah.
And you sort of you're saying to that person, hey, I'm open to wanting to understand, and you used the word curious before, curious about how you see it or what's your perspective on it.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is so inviting.
In the communication skills work I do, usually with some pretty senior leaders, I talk to them about, and for the 2 days we might be together in a training room, for example, I'm challenging them to play this game where you start everything with, it's just my current hallucination, and yet, and then go on and state your opinion. Yeah, back to Nimbin again we go, right? But everything is just your current hallucination. Who's to say whether it's right or wrong? But when you kick off, you're about to express an opinion or view on something, saying, look, it's just my current view or my current model of the world, or it's my current hallucination, which is saying, hey, this could be subject to change, right? Because you were actually born here neutral. You arrived on this planet neutral of any beliefs about anything. And then everything you think about anything, you've taken on board, you've represented in your mind through things that have happened to you and what people have said to you and other people's views. So, in both psychological and I suspect most religious fields, they will get together on one thing and agree that 80% of your beliefs and values intact by age 7. All right. So, everything's being shaped for you in those early years, and saying it's only my current hallucination and now express your opinions. Right? And that's kind of become a bit of a catch cry with my 2 kids who are now 31 and 29. But I love it when Jay's about to express an opinion to me and he goes, I know it's just my current hallucination, and now he expresses his opinion, right?
Brene Brown has a great phrase. She says, the story I'm telling myself right now is, and then
That's
she'll
nice.
say it that way.
Yes, because it is just a story.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing I love when you understand a bit about your subconscious mind and emotional intelligence, your story is just that. One of our cars, you look in the side mirror and it actually has written down the bottom, this view may be distorted, right? The actual reality is not the same as what you think you're looking at through this mirror. The mirror distorts it. And life's like that. We get these distorted views of things because of our beliefs and experiences. It's not actually reality for everyone. And the sooner we realize that our values and opinions are not everyone's, the better the experience we have on the planet is. Dr. Wayne Dyer, I absolutely love his work where he said, sell your opinions and buy curiosity. I love that. There's so much wisdom right there.
We need some kind of app, don't we, that recognizes on our phones or our watches, that recognizes when our heart rate's increasing, our breathing's increasing, like signs that we might be experiencing a conflict, and it does little tests, Remember, this might be distorted. Take a breath, pause.
And,
You've got some new cool glasses, Scott. Maybe they can have
yeah.
the message pop up. Your view might be distorted before you say something.
I was saying to Fiona this morning that I got the watch. Fiona got an Apple Watch recently because it does the heart rate. And I was about a couple of minutes before I was going on for a keynote. I think it was last year or something. And all of a sudden, I looked down and it said, "Warning, your heart rate is very high."
Do you know what mine does? Mine tells me that I sleep during the day because when
Oh,
I'm focused on work, I obviously don't move very much. And it says, you've had 4 hours sleep today between the hours of 9 and 12. I'm like, excuse me, I was working.
I used to have one of those cards in the wallet. I don't know if you remember it, but you can put your thumb on a section for 10 seconds and then it would light up a color shade of where your stress level's at. But an app would be better that just subtly tells you rather than having to pull the card out of the wallet.
Sort of a virtual trapdoor between your brain and your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do need some sort of again, I go back to Covey's work that I loved about just, what's something you can put in between stimulus and response that can moderate your behavior accordingly. And one thing to share with your listeners, Roger Anthony, one of my mentors and co-author of my first book, The 7-Step Pathway to Mastery. Have I mentioned that's available for $24.95 at the website? He used to have a little family of snowflakes. And the analogy was he called them the Indy family. It represented the Indy principle, which was short for make allowances for individual differences. And every snowflake that apparently has fallen or is fallen right now has a different shape and size. Same molecular structure, but a slightly different shape and size. And human beings are exactly the same. We're all unique, little indies, as he called them. And so that's always stuck with me. That's been my pause in between stimulus and response when there's some potential conflict about to play out. It's like, I remember driving into Ballarat where Karina's folks are from, and Steve, her father's been gone for some time now, but he was, well, let me just say, a unique individual, a really unique individual, right? And it sometimes helped as we were about 3 blocks away from pulling into their driveway. Karina, who understands the Indy principle, would just nudge me kind of in the ribs and go, "Now, Ian, Indy, Dad's an Indy." Right. And that was a good just reminder to let things go through to the keeper a bit and just not react to his personality so much. So that's been a nice little tool or trigger I've been able to use to prevent me overly reacting at times.
Ian, I've got a provocative question. See, look, I said provocative, Scott. I got it out right today.
That wasn't the word, Sam. That wasn't the word, Sam.
No, it wasn't. It was provocateur. There you go.
That's it.
I'm going to be a provocateur. See, I've practiced. Ian, what's the most challenging conflict that you've had to deal with in your life?
Oh dear, the most challenging conflict I've had to deal with in my life ever. It may not seem a lot to other people, but when I met Karina, and having been through 2 marriages that, I don't say they were a failure, they were good learning opportunities. And, the first one particularly, I brought 2 kids into the world with Tammy, and they are just brilliant human beings. So there's no way I wire my marriages as a failure. But I did, when I met Karina, you could probably appreciate I'm a little scarred by this thing called marriage. And do you really have to be married to have a relationship that lasts a lifetime? I mean, there's people out there that they don't get married ever, but they've stayed with one another till they're into their late 90s and transitioned off the planet, right? So do you really need the piece of paper? And that was my model of the world. Karina was coming from a different model of the world because she's never been married. And if she's going to spend her life with someone, it was important for her to be married. And so could you see a little bit of conflict creeping in now, right? And it's rubbing me up the wrong way and it's rubbing her up the wrong way. And so there was a risk, I reckon, around the 3-month mark of our relationship that it could have just died on the vine and we went different ways because of that conflict. But then I went and spoke to a guy who was a psychologist and hypnotherapist in Melbourne, a mate of mine. We just have a coffee. Instead of paying someone to give us a checkup from the neck up, we just have a coffee and help one another sort out our problems. And this was becoming a real kind of conflict beneath the surface for Karina and I. And when I shared that with my mate, he said, "Well, Ian, where does this thinking come from? That, what is you peel back the layers on the onion, what is married? What does marriage really mean to you? What's the belief going on? And out it came. And I knew where it came from, my mum. I've heard mum my entire upbringing counselling and giving wisdom to couples, where she'd say, don't rush into marriage. You really don't know a person unless you've been with them for at least 2 years. That's probably the time to make some of those big decisions. So he said, how long have you known Karina? It's like only 3 months. So, okay. So that means you want to wait another 18 odd months until you make that decision to marry her. And I went, well, yeah, that seems to be what's going on at a subconscious level. And he said, how long did you know your first wife before you married her? And I went, oh, yeah, 2 years. And he said, so how's that strategy working out for you? Right? And it was like my mind went emoji mind blow, right? And it was like from that moment, I'm operating to a different belief that you don't need to know someone for 2 years to marry them. And our values were very aligned. And as soon as I got that limiting belief out of the way, we were back on track and heading for our 20th wedding anniversary on the 19th of November. So my point is probably time to trade her in. No, that's not my point. That's not my point at all. That it's going well. And we've learned to navigate, conflict. So it really doesn't become conflict. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the last time we really had a decent argument or conflict over something, because I think the both of us have got to that point, and not at a level of mastery or artistry on it, but we can pretty quickly see that something's starting to spiral a bit out of control. So someone step into third position. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you say that you changed your mind about marriage, or would you say that you changed your mind about the timing? Did you reinterpret it? Did you change your mind? How would you describe what happened for you?
My story changed. So instead of the input that I'm saying to myself, you shouldn't marry someone until you've been with them for at least 2 years, the story changed to, I can marry someone, like people have married one another a week after they've met and they've spent 60 years together. So that was just a hallucination. Yeah.
And so, Ian, the final thing we generally ask guests is about, and you have shared already a number of pearls, conflict pearls, what you've learned, what you could share with the audience in terms of your learnings over the journey of your life. Is there one that sort of comes to mind that you think would be useful?
Look, I really think anyone should grab a good book on emotional intelligence or understanding the subconscious mind, because I think a lot of conflict comes from unconscious beliefs and values that are triggering you. And if you continue on a growth and personal development awareness journey, then that's going to equip you to deal with conflicts so much better. What have we talked about? We've talked about the assertiveness wheel. We've talked about understanding their model of the world. I think the other thing I'd add is just spend some time reading a good book around self-awareness, emotional intelligence, because, IQ, numeric, verbal, abstract intelligence, that's one thing. I've seen the smartest people on the planet not have one iota of emotional intelligence, awareness of how they do themselves and how they impact on other people. That's the fourth type of intelligence you've got to know about.
And do you have a book on that, Ian? Is that what you're trying to plug here, or?
No, absolutely not. No. But I tell you, a good book, when people ask me, I do refer them to An Introduction to NLP, it's called, by Joseph O'Connor. And that's a really good read around emotional intelligence and what's going on with your subconscious mind. Yeah.
So if I had to summarize that in one phrase, it's knowing yourself first is a fundamental foundation for then managing how you interact with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Crocodiles Not Water Lilies self-leadership program that Roger and I used to facilitate, Roger Anthony, we used to teach the 4 layers of teams. So for some of your corporate listeners in leadership roles, Roger would talk to the number 1 team, which, Sam, that's you with you, just the number 1 team. Ian with Ian, you're the only member of that team. And it's about self-leadership and self-awareness of that team. And you can only really be an effective member of a larger team. So he went on to say there's the micro team, which is yourself. Then there is the minor team, like that could be 3 or 4 people. And that could be part of a major team, which is the company. And that's part of a macro team, which is the group, of which you're only one division in a group of nine companies, right? So, but self-leadership of that number one team is the critical base level in the house of cards. And if you don't get that right, you're not going to be as effective in any larger team. Yeah.
And that's knowing your values and being emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
Foundation.
Yep. And recognizing that, okay, that's not the way I do it, the way my other fellow team member is expressing it, but I can make allowances for that unique little indie, their individuality, and not get stressed out. As long as the outcome's going to be the same, let them do it their way. So that's kind of the essence of it. But yeah, knowing yourself, I think, is very, very powerful. And reflecting on, use yourself as a case study. You know, why did I react that way when such and such suggested we go down this path instead of that one? Why did I react and get a little bit kind of defensive and my tone of voice went through the floor? You know, why did I do that? Kind of reflect on that on the drive home from work or on the train trip home from work, because that's about getting to know yourself better. And I'm telling you, every single time it'll link back to one of your values or your beliefs.
We don't tend to do that, do we, though? Instead of reflecting on ourselves, we ruminate about everything the other person did wrong.
That's right. Again, we're back to that pointing the finger again, aren't we? Right? Rather than floating into third position. So I'm going to use that for the rest of my career, Sam. Thanks for the thumbs up.
It wasn't my idea. I'm just translating it.
That's okay. I'll turn it into an icon, own the IP,
and write a book about it. Yeah.
And write a book about it.
See the front cover.
Love it. So yeah, we go into defensive mode rather than reflecting on why did I react the way I did, and then getting to know yourself better and seeing the patterns that are going on in your behaviors. Yeah.
Very deep, Ian. Very true.
We have gone deep, haven't we? Yeah.
That's what we're all about here at Complex Stories. We always wrap up our episodes by encouraging our guest Ian and all our listeners to keep working towards a more peaceful future.
And enjoy your conflict.
Thanks so much, Ian. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks, Ian. That was fabulous, as expected.